tried and not accepted by the Navy. The implication of all what they said was the Herreshoffs had delivered a lesser product, the weight they saved was shortcuts that shouldn't have been taken, and the designer, Nat Herreshoff, got the trim and weight balance all wrong. Now, Nat Herreshoff had never had a situation, I think, where he had someone in writing provide such a report to him, and he had never had to justify himself before on something like this. So George Converse took it upon himself to write a detailed report back to the Secretary of Navy describing how these boats were developed, how the construction and repair representative on the trials had the information about trim all wrong. The detailed testing was done on the Porta models to show that the trim of the boat, as tested, was really the least power solution for that boat. And based upon that report, the Secretary of Navy accepted the vessel. But they had one more boat to deliver. That was Porter and DuPont. Thank you. And so what the next step? Well, they transferred Converse out of here. And a set of orders and a promotion, that something he couldn't refuse. That left Lieutenant Wood here. So Nat Herreshoff appealed to Teddy Roosevelt, who was then the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And you can see from these words Nat Herreshoff writes that he's taking this very personally. He said, because he's asking for help so he can build the boats to his own designs, unhampered by those who have shown themselves antagonistic for no other cause I know of than jealousy. And he also pointed out that all the individuals, New York Yacht Club members, America's Cup syndicate members, who could vouch for his veracity and the truthfulness of the way he went about his work and the truthfulness of his words. And so what he did, he invited Teddy Roosevelt to attend the trials of DuPont. And also he invited New York Yacht Club members. And that's what happened. They came here for the trials. The trials went off and the boat was accepted. But the Herreshoff never bid for another torpedo boat. Who needed grief like this when they had America's Cup customers who all they wanted was a boat that could beat Lipton, and they paid whatever it cost, and they didn't have a bunch of plans and specifications, which by this time had grown to 1 inch thick. Well, before the Herreshoffs, they also received they had received orders for three other torpedo boats, and these were built to Herreshoff designs. And this was the start of what was an idea to standardize the seagoing torpedo boats at about 140 feet, harbor defense torpedo boats about 100 feet. And this is Morris. The top photograph is Morris. That's the torpedo boat. It's 139 feet. That was shown in the Thomas Edison videos or movies. And the boat below is Talbot. And Talbot, that photograph is signed by Fleet Admiral Nimitz. And Nimitz commanded Talbot here in Newport at one time. He was at that time commanding a submarine, but he was brought here to Newport. There was a Navy ship that had gone aground in Brenton Reef, and he was directed to come here and take Talbot out, and they kind of served as a patrol out there while this boat was pulled off the reef. Here's a fitting tribute to Herreshoff torpedo boats. There was a lot of contention at the time. There was considerable debate within the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers expressing concern about the results when the Navy provided plans and specs to ships so ships could be built by inexperienced builders. And here's one officer stating pretty clearly he wished that Herreshoff could build all our boats. Now, I said this is going to end with the begin and end with Narragansett Bay. So here we are in 1904. Teddy Roosevelt is now President of the United States. And Nat Herreshoff down there in the lower right This is a photograph, back rack photograph, which I think Halsey is 1910 or thereabouts.
I think so.
And at that time, the gentleman in the middle, who's a commander, these are these gentlemen when they're admirals, but the gentleman in the middle, Commander Cameron McCrae, Winslow, he was the first CO of Cushing. He got to know Herreshoff at that time, and also Teddy Roosevelt, because Teddy was aboard his boat sometimes. The next gentleman to the right is Frank Fletcher. Frank Fletcher was the second commanding officer of Cushing. McCrae at this time was the naval aide to the president. And he wrote a long letter to Teddy Roosevelt saying that, we're not building the right torpedo boats. And he meant destroyers, torpedo-type boats. He meant destroyers and torpedo boats. And he said, I recommend we establish a board to correct that situation, to consider the types and qualities of vessels and their machinery. And so a board was established. Converse, the gentleman on the left, was appointed the chairman of the board, the president of the board, and Winslow and Fletcher made up the board. And they came up with their ideas as to what the range and speed of vessels they wanted. And then they corresponded with Nat Herreshoff, and he provided with them the length of the boat required, the bunker capacity, and the propulsion requirements. They did not talk to the bureaus. So I rate this one NGH 1, Bureau 0. But they were out of the business. Now, in 1918, again, the company made a move to try to consider getting back into the business. And even at that time, Nat Herreshoff said, I'm not sure we can do it because of the jealousies within the bureaus. And so you could see that affected them very seriously. So, this photograph shows 3 generations of Herreshoff torpedo boats. The Porter on the left, you can see how much larger she was. Stiletto in the middle, and the Cushing on the right. Be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
The delivery of torpedoes
Yes.
coming about concurrently with the design of the boats, there must have been a lot of, I want to say, interaction between the government, the builders, the designers.
Well, let's say the way the boat started was that the boat was delivered without any armament on it, and then the Navy added armament. So when you look at, if you take Stiletto, the Navy then ordered the bow torpedo tube. That was a fixed tube. Now, they only required 17 and a half knots for that boat, because one of the problems was with these bow-mounted, for one thing, torpedoes, you could just fire them straight in those days. Another thing is torpedoes didn't run very fast. So if you had a very fast vessel, you could outrun the torpedo. Therefore, I think it was Frank Fletcher who came up with the idea we should eliminate all the bow torpedoes and only put trainable torpedo tubes on our boats. So that's what was done. So the original boats, they had, Cushing originally had an underwater torpedo tube also in the bow, but they were then changed to just trainable deck-mounted torpedo tubes. Maybe, and Dave is an expert on torpedoes, and Dave, please chime in on.
I'll wait.
Yes, sir.
Did these ever actually go to war and perform?
Yeah, the Cushing was in Havana Bay, or was in Havana Harbor when the Maine blew up, and then immediately got underway and went to Key West, and so they could send a radiogram to Washington, D.C. to tell them about the loss of the Maine. They were used mainly as dispatch boats and gunboats in the Spanish-American War. There's a great photograph, I mean, not a photograph, there's a drawing of, I meant to show it, but there's a drawing of the Porter, I think it was Porter. The Spaniards fired a Schwarzkopf torpedo at her, and the torpedo was coming in at the Porter, and she was it was at the almost the range limit of the torpedo, and there's a young officer jumped overboard off the quarter, swam to the torpedo, kind of wrestled it, and turned its direction. He got a medal. I think he deserved that. Yes, sir.
On the boilers, the tubes were so fine. How did the salt water get cleared out of those?
The idea on the coil boiler was that, see, the boiler is very lightweight. With the lightweight, the boiler was about half the weight of a normal boiler, or a locomotive type boiler, but that was dry weight. When you include the weight of the water, it was 1/3 the weight. So it had very little water in the boiler, and so the water, the steam went through there at very high velocity. The tubes were tapered, and they couldn't clean the tubes because it was a tapered tube. You couldn't get a brush through there. The idea was that the velocity was so high that they thought they would not get scale buildup on the walls of the tubes. That was the concept. Now they used seawater in the early boilers, but then they changed to fresh water. The square boiler was similar, but then they went to the Thornycroft design. Thank you very much for coming.